The blood on the marble floor was still warm when Natalie Foster stepped through the service entrance of Thornspire Manor, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder and her heart racing with the kind of nervous excitement that came with a first day at a new job. She had answered an ad for emergency housekeeping at a private estate, and the pay was too good to question. 3 times the going rate, cash payment, room and board included. The agency had been vague about details, but Natalie needed the money desperately. Her student loans wouldn't pay themselves, and her previous employer had gone bankrupt without warning. So here she was, walking into what looked like a Gothic palace hidden in the hills outside the city, ready to scrub floors and dust antiques for whoever was wealthy enough to own this place. The service hallway was dimly lit, all dark wood paneling and flickering sconces that looked like they belonged in a period drama. Her footsteps echoed on the stone floor as she made her way deeper into the mansion, following the directions the agency had texted her. Down the servants' corridor, 3rd door on the left, report to the head of household staff. She found the door and knocked twice, her knuckles rapping against ancient oak. No answer. She waited, then knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. After a moment's hesitation, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room beyond was a study of some kind, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk carved from what looked like a single piece of blackened wood. And standing beside that desk, his back to her as he examined something on the shelves, was the most striking man Natalie had ever seen. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with hair so pale it was almost white, falling in elegant waves to his shoulders. His skin was porcelain pale, almost luminescent in the low light. He wore dark clothing that fit him, perfectly tailored trousers and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with lean muscle. Everything about him screamed old money and refined taste. Obviously the butler, she thought. God, even the servants here look like they stepped out of a fashion magazine. Excuse me, she said, trying to sound professional despite her nerves. I'm Natalie Foster. The agency sent me? I'm the new housekeeper. The man went absolutely still. Then, very slowly, he turned to face her. Natalie's breath caught. His face was aristocratic and severe, all sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. His eyes were the most unusual shade of amber she had ever seen, almost glowing in the dim light. There was something predatory about him, something that made every instinct in her body scream danger, even as her heart skipped a beat. But it was his expression that stopped her cold. He was staring at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, his eyes wide with what looked like genuine shock. "You're the new maid," he said, and his voice was like velvet over steel, accented with something old world that she couldn't quite place. Not a question, a statement. "Housekeeper, technically," she corrected, straightening her shoulders. "Is the head of household available? I was told to report here." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or confusion. Then his features smoothed into an expression of careful neutrality. "The head of household is occupied at the moment. I can show you to your quarters and explain your duties." Oh, that seemed irregular, but she supposed butlers did handle the domestic staff in old-fashioned households. "Okay, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Vladric," he said after the barest hesitation. "You may call me Vladric, just one name, very mysterious." Very old-school servant class, she thought, remembering period dramas where the staff went by single names or surnames only. It made sense in a weird, anachronistic way. "Nice to meet you, Vladric." "Like I said, I'm Natalie." She stuck out her hand, trying for friendly and professional. He stared at her outstretched hand like it was a snake. For a long moment he didn't move. Then slowly he reached out and took her hand in his. His skin was cool to the touch, his grip firm but careful, as if he were handling something fragile and precious. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up her arm. His eyes widened fractionally, and she could have sworn she saw his pupils dilate. They stood there, hands clasped, staring at each other in the dim study while something inexplicable crackled in the air between them. Then Vladric dropped her hand like it had burned him and took a step back. "Follow me," he said, his voice rougher than before. "I'll show you where you'll be staying." He moved past her toward the door, and she had to hurry to keep up. For someone who was supposed to be showing her around, he seemed extremely tense, his shoulders rigid beneath his expensive shirt. She followed him through a maze of corridors, trying to memorize the route and failing. The manor was enormous, a labyrinth of grand hallways and smaller service passages, all decorated in the same Gothic opulence. Dark wood, rich fabrics, artwork that looked centuries old. "How long have you worked here?" she asked, trying to break the awkward silence. "A very long time," Vladric said without looking back at her. "The house is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. It is very old, very private. The master values discretion above all else." "I can be discreet," Natalie assured him. "The agency made it clear this was a confidential position. I signed an NDA and everything." That made him pause mid-step. He turned to look at her, those strange amber eyes searching her face. "Did you? And what exactly did this agency tell you about the position?" just that it was emergency housekeeping for a private estate. High pay, room and board, temporary position with possibility of extension. They said the previous housekeeper left suddenly and the household needed someone immediately. She shrugged. I needed the work. I'm in grad school and my previous job fell through, so the timing was perfect. Grad school. He was staring at her with that intense focus again. What are you studying? Art history and conservation. I want to work in museum restoration eventually. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his severe features. How appropriate. Before she could ask what he meant by that, he turned and continued walking. They climbed a narrow staircase, the servant's stair, she assumed, and emerged into another corridor, this one more modest than the grand hallways below. The walls were still fine plaster, but the decorations were simpler, more functional. Vladric stopped before a heavy wooden door and pushed it open, gesturing for her to enter. Your room. Natalie stepped inside and blinked in surprise. She had expected something small and sparse, a typical servant's quarters. Instead, she found herself in a beautiful bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment back in the city. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in deep burgundy fabric. There was an ornate wardrobe, a writing desk by the window, even a small bookshelf. A door on the far wall stood ajar, revealing a private bathroom beyond. This is for me? She asked, turning back to Vladric. This is way too nice for... All staff quarters are maintained to a high standard, he interrupted smoothly. The master believes that those who serve the household should be comfortable. She wanted to argue that this went way beyond comfortable, but the look on his face suggested the discussion was closed. Instead, she set her duffel bag on the bed and turned back to him. Okay, so what are my duties? Where do I start? Vladric leaned against the doorframe, watching her with that unnerving intensity. In the better light of the bedroom, she could see him more clearly, and God, he really was beautiful in a way that seemed almost inhuman. Too perfect, too elegant. The kind of face that belonged on sculptures in museums, not on a butler in a Gothic mansion. The manor has several wings, he began. Some are in regular use, others are closed off and should not be entered without explicit permission. You will be responsible for maintaining the public rooms, the guest quarters, and the main halls. The master's private chambers and certain other areas are strictly off limits. Makes sense. Who else is on the staff? Should I coordinate with them? Another pause. Another flicker of something in those amber eyes. The household staff is minimal at present. Most of the regular staff are on leave. You will likely be working alone for the immediate future. That seemed weird for a house this size, but she nodded. Okay. What about the master of the house? Will I meet him? Eventually, Vladric said, his voice carefully neutral. He keeps unusual hours. You may not encounter him frequently, but you'll be around? To answer questions and stuff? I will be nearby. He straightened, pushing away from the doorframe. Rest tonight. Familiarize yourself with your quarters. Tomorrow evening, I will give you a full tour of the areas you'll be maintaining and provide you with specific instructions. Tomorrow evening? Not tomorrow morning? The household operates on a nocturnal schedule, he said. You'll find it easier to adjust your sleep pattern accordingly. All your meals will be provided, and they will be left for you in the kitchen. You are free to explore the permitted areas of the manor, but I must stress again, do not enter the restricted wings. They are dangerous, and we cannot guarantee your safety if you disregard this warning. Dangerous. That was an odd way to describe parts of a house. What's dangerous about them? Structural damage? Unsafe floors? Something like that. He moved toward the door, clearly ready to leave. Rest well, Natalie Foster. I will return for you tomorrow evening 1 hour after sunset. And then he was gone. Closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded very final, Natalie stood alone in her unexpectedly luxurious bedroom, her mind spinning with questions. This whole situation was bizarre. A Gothic mansion in the hills, staffed by a skeleton crew, operating on a nocturnal schedule, with mysterious restricted areas that were somehow dangerous. And that butler Vladric who looked like a fallen angel and stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. She should probably be more worried about all the red flags. Instead, she found herself thinking about the way his hand had felt in hers, cool and strong, and the way those amber eyes had seemed to glow when he looked at her. Get it together, Natalie, she told herself firmly. It's just a job, a weird job, but you need the money. Keep your head down, do the work, and don't develop a crush on the impossibly beautiful butler who probably thinks you're ridiculous. She unpacked her meager belongings, showered in the surprisingly modern bathroom, and climbed into the massive four-poster bed. Despite her exhaustion from the day, sleep was a long time coming. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Vladric's face, pale and perfect and utterly inhuman in its beauty. In another part of the manor, in chambers far more opulent than Natalie could imagine, Vladric Drakenmore, crown prince of the Nightborn court, heir to the vampire throne, master of Thornspire Manor and a dozen other estates across the world, paced like a caged predator, a maid. She thought he was the butler. The butler, he had been alive for 3 centuries. He had commanded armies, negotiated treaties between vampire courts, destroyed his enemies with brutal efficiency. He was one of the oldest and most powerful vampires in existence, feared and respected by immortals and mortals alike. And this slip of a human girl had walked into his study and asked to speak to the head of household, assuming he was the help. It would be insulting if it weren't so utterly absurd, and yet he had played along. Why? He should have corrected her immediately, should have explained who and what he was, should have sent her away before she got herself killed. The manor was not safe for humans, not now, not with the power struggles brewing in the vampire courts. That was why he had dismissed most of his human staff, sending them away for their own protection. But instead of dismissing her, he had let her believe he was a servant. He had shown her to guest quarters, because he couldn't bear the thought of putting her in actual servants' rooms in the East Wing, and told her she would be working here. It was madness, sheer madness. But when she had touched his hand, when her warm mortal skin had made contact with his, he had felt something he hadn't experienced in over a century, a pull, a connection. The faintest whisper of something his kind hadn't believed in for millennia, a blood bond. No, impossible. Blood bonds were myth, legend, fairy tales that young vampires told each other. The idea that a vampire could form a supernatural connection with a human, that one mortal could become essential to an immortal's very existence, it was romantic nonsense, nothing more, and yet his blood sang in his veins at her nearness. His instincts, usually so controlled, had screamed at him to protect her, claim her, keep her safe from all harm. When she had smiled at him with those warm brown eyes, something in his chest had clenched painfully, an organ he had thought long dead remembering how to beat. He could not allow this. He was a vampire prince with responsibilities to his court and his people. The political situation was precarious enough without him developing an attachment to a human woman. There were factions within the Nightborn court who wanted him dead, who saw his relatively moderate policies toward humans as weakness. If they discovered a mortal he cared about, they would use her against him without hesitation. The smart thing, the rational thing, would be to compel her to forget she had ever come here and send her back to the city with enough money to cover her trouble. But he couldn't. The thought of erasing himself from her memory, of never seeing her again, was physically painful, and that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. So he would keep her here, just for a little while. Just until he understood what this strange connection meant. He would maintain the fiction that he was merely a servant, keep her safe within the protected areas of the manor, and try very hard not to think about the way she had looked at him with curiosity and interest instead of fear. It was a terrible plan doomed to failure. He knew it even as he committed to it, but Vladric Drakenmore had survived 3 centuries by being adaptable, and he would find a way to navigate this impossible situation. He had to, because the alternative, letting Natalie Foster walk away, was simply not acceptable. The next evening, Natalie woke to find the sun setting outside her window, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. She had slept through most of the day, her body already beginning to adjust to the nocturnal schedule Vladric had mentioned. Someone had left a tray outside her door while she slept, fresh fruit, bread, cheese, and a carafe of coffee that was somehow still hot. She ate quickly, then dressed in simple work clothes and waited. Exactly 1 hour after the sun dipped below the horizon, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Vladric standing in the hallway, looking just as impossibly beautiful as he had the night before. Tonight he wore all black trousers, black shirt, black coat that hung to his knees. His white hair was pulled back from his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his features. Those amber eyes locked onto her immediately, and she felt that same electric jolt of awareness. "Good evening," he said formally. "Are you ready for your tour?" "Absolutely." She stepped into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind her. "Lead the way." He took her through the manor methodically, pointing out the rooms she would be responsible for maintaining. The grand ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. The formal dining room with a table that could seat 40. A library that made her art history heart sing, filled with books that looked genuinely ancient. A portrait gallery lined with paintings of stern-faced aristocrats, all of them sharing the same pale hair and amber eyes as Vladric. "Are these the master's ancestors?" she asked, studying a particularly imposing portrait of a man in medieval armor. "Something like that," Vladric murmured. Was she imagining it, or did he sound amused? They continued through drawing rooms and parlors, past suits of armor and display cases filled with artifacts that should probably be in museums. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, evidence that the household had indeed been operating with minimal staff. "This is going to take forever to clean properly," Natalie said, running a finger along a dusty side table. "I hope you weren't expecting miracles on the first day. Take whatever time you need. Thoroughness is more important than speed." She glanced at him sidelong. He walked beside her with perfect posture, his movements graceful and controlled. There was something almost predatory about the way he moved, like a big cat pretending to be domesticated. "Can I ask you something?" "You may ask, I may not answer." "Fair enough." She turned to face him fully, studying his face in the lamplight. "You don't seem like any butler I've ever heard of. You're very, I don't know, commanding? It's like you're used to giving orders, not taking them." His expression flickered, a crack in that careful neutrality. For a moment she thought she saw something raw in his eyes, something almost vulnerable. Then it was gone, replaced by cool composure. "I have been with the household for a very long time," he said carefully. "I am trusted with significant responsibilities. Perhaps that has affected my bearing." It was a non-answer and they both knew it. But Natalie let it drop. If Vladric had secrets, well, that was his business. She had enough to worry about just figuring out how to clean this enormous mansion by herself. They continued the tour, and Natalie found herself relaxing despite the oddness of the situation. Vladric was a good guide, knowledgeable about the manor's history and surprisingly patient with her questions. He told her about the architecture, pointed out valuable pieces that needed special care, warned her about antique furniture that was more fragile than it looked. They were in the portrait gallery again. Natalie standing before a painting of a beautiful woman in an elaborate gown, when Vladric moved close behind her. She could feel the coolness radiating from him, could smell something crisp and clean like winter air. "That portrait is over 200 years old," he said quietly, his voice close to her ear. "The artist was commissioned by the master's family. It took him 6 months to complete." Natalie shivered at his nearness, her skin breaking out in goosebumps that had nothing to do with temperature. "She's beautiful," she managed to say. "She looks sad, though." "See around the eyes?" Vladric was silent for a long moment. "She was bound to a life she did not choose," he said finally. "I imagine that would make anyone melancholy. Do you know what happened to her?" "She found her freedom eventually. One way or another, we all do." There was something heavy in his words, something that made Natalie turn to look at him. He was staring at the portrait with an expression she couldn't read, his perfect features shadowed in the lamplight. "Vladric," she said softly. "What's really going on here? This place, this job, something feels off. I can't put my finger on it, but—" He looked down at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "If I told you to leave right now, to take your payment and go back to the city and forget you ever came here, would you do it?" Her heart hammered in her chest. "Are you telling me to leave? I am asking if you would, if you had the choice." Natalie thought about it seriously. She thought about her student loans and her tiny apartment and her uncertain future. She thought about the strangeness of this manor, the mysterious master she had never met, the dangerous restricted areas she was forbidden to enter. She thought about all the sensible reasons why she should say yes, she would leave. She would take the money and run. And then she thought about Vladric, beautiful and haunted and clearly carrying secrets that weighed on him like chains. She thought about the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and impossible. She thought about the connection she felt, inexplicable and undeniable, pulling her toward him. "No," she said, "I wouldn't leave, not unless you gave me a good reason why I should." Something blazed in his eyes, bright and fierce. He raised one hand as if to touch her face, then stopped himself, his fingers curling into a fist. "You should be afraid of me," he whispered. "You should run from this place and never look back." "Why? What are you?" The question hung in the air between them. For a heartbeat too, she thought, he might actually answer. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the gallery, rapid and urgent, and Vladric went rigid. A man appeared in the doorway, another impossibly beautiful man with white hair and pale skin, dressed in dark formal clothing. His eyes were a vivid crimson, and when he saw Natalie, they widened in shock. "My lord," he said, his voice urgent, "we have a situation. The Crimson Court has sent an emissary. He's demanding an audience, and he's brought." The newcomer's eyes flicked to Natalie, then back to Vladric. "He's brought guards, armed." Vladric's expression went cold and dangerous. "How many?" "6, and they're not being subtle about their intentions. Tell them I will receive their emissary in the formal study, alone. The guards remain outside the manor grounds, or they will be considered a hostile force." "My lord, I don't think those are my orders, Caspian." Vladric's voice was pure command, the tone of someone who expected absolute obedience. "And send word to Marcus and Seraphine." "I want them here within the hour." The man Caspian bowed deeply. "As you wish, my lord." He disappeared as quickly as he had come. Natalie stared at Vladric. "My lord." The newcomer had called him my lord, not by his name, had bowed to him with the deference of a servant to a master. "You're not the butler," she said slowly, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. "You're the master. You're the owner of this manor. You've been lying to me this entire time." Vladric turned to face her, and there was something bleak in his expression. "Yes, why?" The word came out sharper than she intended, anger and hurt warring in her chest. "Why would you pretend to be a servant? Why, let me think." She broke off, shaking her head. God, I've been such an idiot. All of it was a lie, not all of it. He took a step toward her and she took a step back. Pain flashed across his face. Natalie, please. Let me explain. Explain what? That you thought it would be funny to mess with the hired help? That you were bored and wanted to see how long you could keep up the charade? No, nothing like that. He ran a hand through his white hair, frustration clear in every line of his body. When you walked into my study last night, you looked at me and saw a servant. Not a master, not someone to be feared or deferred to. Just a person, and I realized I wanted that. Just for a little while, I wanted to be seen as something other than what I am. And what are you exactly? Before he could answer, there was a commotion from somewhere below, raised voices, the sound of doors slamming. Vladric's head whipped toward the sound, his whole body tense and alert. You need to go to your room, he said urgently. Lock the door and do not come out until I come for you. Do you understand? No matter what you hear. What's happening? Who are these people? Business associates. Dangerous ones. Please, Natalie. I cannot protect you if you are in the middle of this. Protect her. From what? But the look in his eyes was desperate, almost frightened, and that scared her more than anything else. This man, whoever and whatever he was, did not seem like the type to frighten easily. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay, I'll go to my room, but Vladric, be careful. The relief that washed over his features was palpable. I will, I promise. Now go, quickly, she ran. Through the portrait gallery, down the corridor, up the servants' stairs to her room. She locked the door as instructed, and then stood in the middle of her beautiful bedroom, her heart racing, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't answer. What had she gotten herself into? An hour later, Natalie sat on her bed, straining to hear anything from the floors below. The manor was too well built. The thick walls and heavy floors muted sound to almost nothing. Occasionally she thought she heard voices, but she couldn't make out words. She should leave. She should pack her bag, climb out the window if necessary, and get as far from this place as possible. Vladric had lied to her. This whole situation was clearly dangerous in ways she didn't understand. Every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to run, but she couldn't stop thinking about the look on his face when she had said she wouldn't leave. That fierce, bright joy, like she had given him something he had thought lost forever. And she couldn't stop thinking about how he had said he couldn't protect her if she was in the middle of whatever was happening downstairs, like her safety mattered to him, like it mattered more than anything. A crash from below made her jump, then shouting, clear enough that she could hear the anger in it even if she couldn't make out words. More crashing, the sound of something heavy breaking. Natalie was on her feet before she consciously decided to move. Vladric had told her to stay in her room, but if he was in trouble, if he needed help, she unlocked her door and slipped into the hallway. The manor was dark, lit only by occasional sconces. She made her way toward the main staircase, moving as quietly as she could, her heart hammering against her ribs. The shouting was clearer now. Male voices, multiple speakers, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. And underneath it all, a low growling sound that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She crept down the stairs, staying close to the wall. The voices were coming from the formal study, the same room where she had first met Vladric. The door stood ajar, light spilling out into the hallway. Natalie positioned herself where she could see through the gap without being seen and looked inside. What she saw made her blood run cold. Vladric stood in the center of the room, and he was not alone. 6 men surrounded him, all of them with the same white hair and pale skin, but their eyes glowed crimson in the lamplight. They moved with inhuman grace, circling him like wolves around prey. And their teeth, their teeth were elongated into fangs that gleamed like knives. Vampires. They were vampires. All of them, including Vladric. As she watched, frozen in shock and terror, one of the creatures lunged at Vladric with impossible speed. Vladric moved just as fast, his hand shooting out to catch his attacker by the throat. He lifted the other vampire off the ground one-handed, his expression cold and merciless. I am Crown Prince of the Nightborn Court, Vladric said, and his voice carried power that made the air itself vibrate. You come into my home, threaten my household, and dare to raise your hand against me? Shall I remind you of the penalty for such insolence? The vampire he held by the throat made a choking sound. Vladric tightened his grip, and Natalie heard bone crack. Enough. Another voice, cultured and cold. A 7th vampire emerged from the shadows, this one dressed in elaborate robes that looked medieval. Release him, Drakenmore. We did not come here to fight. We came with a message from the Crimson Court. Vladric threw the vampire he was holding across the room. The creature slammed into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster and slid to the floor, groaning. Vladric didn't even glance at him. His attention was fixed on the robed vampire, and the look on his face was absolutely murderous. A message that requires armed guards and an assault on my person? The Crimson Court's diplomacy has declined significantly. The Crimson Court grows impatient with your progressive policies, my lord. The robed vampire smiled, revealing fangs. Vampire and human living in harmony, protecting mortals instead of feeding on them? These ideas are dangerous. They threaten the natural order. The natural order is changing whether the Crimson Court likes it or not. We can adapt, or we can face extinction. I know which option I prefer, and that is why we have come, to offer you a choice, my lord. The robed vampire gestured, and two of the guards dragged forward a struggling figure. A young woman, human, her face pale with terror. Renounce your foolish policies. Feed on this mortal here and now before witnesses, and prove that you have not forgotten what you are. Do this, and the Crimson Court will support your claim to the throne. Vladric's expression didn't change, but Natalie saw his hands curl into fists. And if I refuse, then the Crimson Court will declare you unfit to rule. They will support your cousin Demetrius's claim instead, and we both know what that means for your precious humans. Demetrius believes mortals are livestock, nothing more. Under his rule, the old ways will return with a vengeance. The human woman was crying now, begging in a language Natalie didn't understand. Vladric looked at her, and something painful crossed his perfect features. You would force me to murder an innocent to prove my loyalty to a court that values tradition over survival. We would force you to remember what you are, a vampire, a predator, a creature of the night, not a guardian of humans. The robed vampire's smile widened. Unless, of course, there is a specific mortal you have developed an attachment to. We have heard interesting rumors about the Nightborn Prince and his unusual interest in protecting human lives. Some wonder if perhaps there is one human life in particular you wish to protect. Vladric went absolutely still. I have no idea what you're suggesting. No? Then it should be easy for you to prove it. Feed on this woman, drain her, show us that no mortal means anything to you beyond their blood. Natalie's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She should run, she should get out of here right now before they discovered her. But she couldn't move, couldn't look away from Vladric's face as he stared at the terrified human woman. I will not, he said quietly. I will not kill an innocent to satisfy your barbaric test. Tell the Crimson Court they can take their ultimatum, and he stopped mid-sentence. His head turned, those amber eyes looking directly at the door where Natalie hid, their gazes locked, and she saw horror bloom across his features. Run, he said, his voice low and urgent. Natalie, run! But it was too late. The robed vampire's head snapped around, following Vladric's gaze. Crimson eyes locked onto Natalie, and the creature's smile became predatory. Well, well, he purred. What do we have here? A human wandering the halls of the Nightborn Prince's manor. How very interesting. Natalie tried to run. She turned and bolted, her feet slipping on the polished floor, but the vampire was faster than anything she had ever seen. One moment he was across the room, the next he was in front of her, blocking her escape. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm in a grip like iron. Vladric's voice was a roar of fury. Natalie heard the sound of a struggle, then something crashed into the wall behind her. The robed vampire dragged her back into the study. Natalie fought, kicking and scratching, but she might as well have been fighting a statue for all the good it did. The creature held her effortlessly, examining her face with cold curiosity. She's pretty, he observed, and you know her name, how very curious. He looked at Vladric, who was being held back by 4 of the guards, his face a mask of rage and desperation. Is this the mortal, my lord? Is this the one who has made you forget your nature? Touch her and I will destroy you, Vladric snarled. I will burn the Crimson Court to ash. I will hunt down every vampire who supported this and tear them apart with my bare hands. Let her go, the robed vampire laughed. Oh, this is delicious. The mighty Vladric Drakenmore brought low by a human girl. The Crimson Court will find this most illuminating. He pulled Natalie closer, and she felt his breath against her neck, cold and wrong. Perhaps we need a different demonstration, my lord. Instead of proving you can kill a mortal, prove you can watch one die. Natalie felt fangs graze her throat. She closed her eyes, bracing for pain, for death, for the world exploded into violence. Vladric tore free from the vampires, holding him with a strength that seemed impossible even for a creature like him. He moved so fast he was just a blur of motion. His hand closed around the robed vampire's throat, and he ripped the creature away from Natalie with such force that she heard bones snap. The robed vampire screamed. Vladric didn't stop. He was fury incarnate, a force of nature, tearing through the other vampires like they were made of paper. Blood sprayed across the walls, black blood that smoked and hissed where it landed. One vampire tried to run. Vladric caught him and slammed him into the floor hard enough to crack the marble. Another tried to fight back. Vladric broke his neck with a casual twist of his hands. It was over in seconds. 7 vampires lay broken and bleeding on the floor of the study. The robed vampire was still alive, pinned beneath Vladric's foot, whimpering in pain. You made a mistake coming here, Vladric said, and his voice was empty of all emotion. An enormous mistake. You threatened what is mine. You touched her. There is no forgiveness for that, no mercy. He knelt, grabbed the robed vampire by the hair, and yanked his head back, exposing his throat. Go back to the Crimson Court. Tell them that Crown Prince Vladric Drakenmoor does not respond well to threats. Tell them that if they send assassins to my home again, I will consider it an act of war. And tell them," he leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the room. "Tell them I have found my consort, a human consort. And if they have a problem with that, they can come discuss it with me personally." He released the vampire and stood, stepping back. "Get out. Take your broken soldiers with you. You have until I count to 10. The robed vampire scrambled to his feet, his composure shattered. He and his guards grabbed their wounded and fled, moving with desperate speed. The sound of their retreat echoed through the manor, then faded into silence. Vladric stood alone in the center of his destroyed study, breathing hard, his hands still stained with black blood. Then he turned to Natalie, and the cold fury drained from his face, replaced by something vulnerable and afraid. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough. "Did he hurt you?" Natalie couldn't speak. She could only stare at him. At this creature who had just destroyed 7 vampires with his bare hands, who had called her his consort, who was looking at her now like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Natalie, please. Say something. Tell me you're all right." "You're a vampire," she managed to whisper. "Yes, the master of this manor. A vampire prince. Yes, and you just killed or tried to kill 7 other vampires because they threatened me, yes." He took a step toward her, moving slowly like he was approaching a frightened animal. "I am sorry, I am so sorry. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have sent you away before you could be put in danger. But I—" His voice broke. "I could not. I tried, but I could not bear to let you go." "Why?" The question came out as barely more than a breath. "Why me? You don't even know me." Vladric stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the amber of his eyes, the perfect inhuman beauty of his features. "When you touched my hand last night, I felt something I have not felt in 3 centuries. A connection, a bond. My kind has legends about such things, blood bonds we call them. A link between a vampire and a mortal so strong it transcends death itself. I did not believe in them. I thought they were myths. But then you walked into my study and every instinct I possess screamed at me that you were mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine." Natalie's heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. "That's insane. That's not how things work. You can't just claim someone." I know it's insane, but it is true nonetheless." He held out his hand, palm up, and offering, "I will not force you to stay. If you wish to leave, I will escort you back to the city myself and ensure you are compensated for your trouble. I will even arrange for your memories of this night to be altered if you wish. You need never remember vampires exist." But she could hear the unspoken word hanging between them. "But if you stay, if you choose to stay, I swear to you on everything I am that I will protect you. I will keep you safe from the political machinations of my kind. I will give you everything you could possibly desire, and I will spend every night of my immortal existence trying to be worthy of the gift you have given me simply by existing." It was the most romantic and terrifying thing anyone had ever said to her. Natalie looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, and saw nothing but desperate sincerity in those strange amber eyes. She should run. She should absolutely run. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, cool and careful, and the relief that washed over his features was almost painful to witness. "I must be out of my mind," she said shakily. "You're a vampire, an actual vampire. This is crazy, completely insane," Vladric agreed. But he was smiling. A real genuine smile that transformed his face from beautiful to absolutely devastating. "But I find I do not care, do you?" Natalie thought about her student loans and her tiny apartment and her ordinary life in the city. She thought about everything she was supposed to want: safety, security, normalcy. And then she thought about the way Vladric looked at her like she was sunlight in his eternal darkness. The way he had torn through his own kind without hesitation to protect her. The way his hand felt in hers, cool but strong, an anchor in the storm. "No," she said, "I don't care either." This time when he pulled her close, she didn't resist. She let him fold her into an embrace that was careful and controlled, like he was holding something infinitely precious. His head bent, his face pressing into her hair, and she felt him shudder. "Thank you," he whispered against her temple. "Thank you, Natalie Foster. You have given me a gift beyond price." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "I still think you're crazy, and I'm definitely crazy for staying. But I want to understand. I want to know about your world, about what you are. Can you tell me?" All of it," he agreed. "I will hide nothing from you. But perhaps we should relocate to more comfortable surroundings. And I should clean up this mess before—" "My lord!" Caspian appeared in the doorway, his crimson eyes wide with shock as he took in the destroyed study and the black blood everywhere. "What happened?" "We heard fighting, but by the time we arrived he stopped, staring at Natalie in Vladric's arms." "Is that a human?" "This is Natalie Foster," Vladric said, and there was unmistakable pride in his voice. "My consort. She will be treated with the same respect and protection as you would afford me. Spread the word to the household." Caspian's jaw actually dropped. My lord, you cannot be serious, a human consort? The court will never accept. Then the court will have to adjust their expectations. Vladric's voice went hard. I have made my choice. Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me personally. Caspian stared at his master for a long moment, then at Natalie, then back to Vladric. Slowly he bowed. As you wish, my lord. I will inform the household. And congratulations? Thank you, Caspian. Now please arrange for this room to be cleaned and repaired. And send word to Marcus and Seraphine that the situation has been handled. I do not want to be disturbed for the rest of the night. Caspian bowed again and withdrew, though not before giving Natalie one last incredulous look. Vladric turned back to her, raising one eyebrow. Still sure you want to stay? I'm really not sure, Natalie admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. His smile was brilliant. Then come, let me show you my real quarters, and I will tell you everything you wish to know about vampires, courts, and the immortal prince who has apparently lost his mind over a graduate student in art history. He led her through the manor, down corridors she hadn't seen before, past the restricted areas he had warned her about. Other vampires appeared, occasionally servants of the household, Natalie realized, all of them staring at her with varying degrees of shock and curiosity. Vladric ignored them all, his focus entirely on her. They finally arrived at a set of ornate double doors. Vladric pushed them open, revealing chambers that made her guest room look like a closet. The bedroom beyond was enormous, dominated by a massive bed draped in midnight blue silk. The walls were lined with bookshelves and artwork. The furniture was antique and obviously priceless. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the grounds, currently covered with heavy curtains to block out any possibility of sunlight. This is where you actually live, Natalie said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Yes, these are my private quarters. No one enters here without my explicit permission. He moved to a sideboard and poured himself a glass of something dark red from a crystal decanter. At her look, he said, blood, from a blood bank. I have not fed from a living human in over a century. I prefer not to if I can avoid it. Natalie sat down on a velvet settee, her legs suddenly unsteady. Okay, so, vampire basics. You drink blood, you're immortal, you can't go out in sunlight. What else? Vladric settled into a chair across from her, the picture of elegance despite the blood staining his clothes. We are stronger and faster than humans. We have enhanced senses. We can compel weaker minds, though it does not work on everyone. We can be killed by a stake through the heart, decapitation, or prolonged exposure to sunlight. We need blood to survive, though we do not need to kill to obtain it. And we are organized into courts, vampire societies that govern our kind and maintain the secrecy of our existence from the mortal world. And you're a prince of the Nightborn court. Crown prince, technically. Heir to the throne. My father was king before he was killed in a court dispute 200 years ago. I have been ruling as regent since then, waiting to formally take the throne once certain political matters are resolved. What kind of political matters? His expression darkened. There are factions within vampire society who believe we should return to the old ways, treating humans as prey, as livestock, living in the shadows and taking what we want without concern for mortal laws or mortal lives. I believe that path leads only to our destruction. The world has changed. Humans have technology now, weapons that could hunt us to extinction if they knew we existed. Our only hope for survival is to adapt, to find ways to coexist peacefully with humanity. And the Crimson Court doesn't agree. No, they represent the old guard, the traditionalists. They see my policies as weakness. And tonight they tried to force me to prove I had not lost sight of what I am. He set down his glass, his hands clenching. They wanted me to kill an innocent human to demonstrate my loyalty. And when I refused, they discovered you. Now they know about the blood bond, and they will use it against me. Natalie processed that. The robe vampire said something about supporting your cousin's claim to the throne. Who's that? Demetrius Blackmore. My cousin and one of the most dangerous vampires alive. He believes humans exist only to serve vampire needs. If he becomes king, he will roll back every protection I have put in place. It will be open season on mortals again, and the death toll will be catastrophic, both human and vampire, because humanity will eventually fight back. So you need to become king to stop him. Yes, but to do that, I need support from the major courts. The Crimson Court is one of the most powerful. If they back Demetrius instead of me, he shook his head. The political landscape becomes very complicated. Natalie stood and crossed to him, kneeling beside his chair so she could meet his eyes. And now I've made things worse. Because you claimed me as your consort, and that's going to be seen as proof that you're too human-friendly to be a proper vampire king. Vladric reached out and cupped her face in his cool palm. You have made nothing worse. You have given me something worth fighting for beyond political theory and survival strategy. You have reminded me why I wanted to protect humanity in the first place. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I do not regret claiming you. I will never regret it, no matter what happens. Even if it costs you your throne, even then. He said it with such certainty that she believed him. I have been alone for so long, Natalie. Centuries of existence surrounded by people but never truly connected to anyone. And then you walked into my study, looked at me with those warm brown eyes, and treated me like I was just a person, not a prince, not a monster, just someone who might help you find your way. Do you have any idea how precious that was? Tears pricked at Natalie's eyes. I think I'm beginning to understand. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together close enough that she could feel the coolness of his skin against her warmth. I need to know something, she said quietly. This blood bond, does it mean I don't have a choice? Am I magically compelled to be with you or something? No, he pulled back so he could look her in the eyes. A blood bond creates a connection, but it does not override free will. You could walk away right now if you chose. It would be painful for both of us. But it is possible. The bond only means that we are compatible, that we have the potential for something deeper than normal vampire-human relationships. What we do with that potential is entirely up to us. So I'm choosing this, choosing you, of my own free will. Yes, and I am choosing you, with everything I am. Natalie searched his face, looking for any hint of deception or manipulation. She found only sincerity and that desperate vulnerability that he showed only to her. Okay, she said. Okay, I'm in. I don't know what I'm doing and I'm probably making the biggest mistake of my life, but I'm in. So what happens now? Vladric's smile was radiant. Now I teach you about my world. I introduce you to the members of my court who can be trusted. I increase security around the manor because the Crimson Court will almost certainly try something else. And I hope very much that you will allow me to court you properly, because simply claiming you as my consort does not seem adequate. You deserve poetry and romance and all the things a human woman should have when someone is trying to win her heart. You can write poetry? I am 300 years old. I have had time to learn many skills. I'd like to hear some of your poetry. Then you shall. He stood, drawing her up with him. But first you should rest. It has been an eventful night and dawn is approaching. I must retreat to my chambers before the sun rises, but you are free to explore the manor. Or sleep, whatever you prefer. Wait. Natalie caught his hand as he started to pull away. Can I ask you something? When you thought I was the maid and I thought you were the butler, would you have told me the truth eventually? Or were you just going to keep up the pretense? Vladric had the grace to look embarrassed. I honestly do not know. I told myself it was temporary, that I would reveal the truth when the time was right. But in reality, I think I was simply enjoying the illusion. For the first time in centuries, someone saw me as just Vladric, not Crown Prince Drakenmore, not the master of a great estate, just a man who happened to work in a manor. He squeezed her hand gently. I am sorry I lied to you. It was selfish and foolish. It was, she agreed. But I kind of understand why you did it. And honestly, I think I fell for just Vladric anyway. The prince thing is still kind of terrifying. I will do my best to be less terrifying. Don't work too hard at it. The scary vampire prince thing is kind of hot. He laughed, a sound of pure delight. Is it now? I shall keep that in mind. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her heart flutter. Sleep well, Natalie Foster. Dream of me. I think that's pretty much guaranteed at this point. He left her then, disappearing into the depths of his chambers as the first hints of dawn touched the sky outside. Natalie made her way back to her own room, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She had come to this manor looking for a job. Instead, she had found vampires, court politics, and an immortal prince who looked at her like she was the answer to prayers he had thought long abandoned. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape. Instead, she fell asleep thinking about amber eyes and cool hands and the way Vladric had said mine like it was a sacred vow. Over the next several weeks, Natalie's life transformed into something out of a fairy tale. If fairy tales involved vampire politics and the constant threat of assassination, Vladric kept his promise to teach her about his world. Every evening after sunset they would meet in his study or the library, and he would tell her about vampire history, about the courts and their complex power structures, about the ancient laws that governed his kind. She learned that vampires had been living alongside humans for millennia, hidden in plain sight, that every major city had a vampire presence, that there were councils and treaties and diplomatic relationships between different vampire factions. She learned that Vladric was considered relatively young for a vampire of his station, that most vampire lords were over 500 years old, that there were ancient creatures who remembered the fall of Rome and the rise of Christianity. She learned about bloodlines and abilities, about how some vampires developed special powers as they aged. Vladric could move with such speed that he seemed to teleport, could compel almost any mind with a glance, could sense the emotions of those around him like they were his own. And she learned that being the consort of the crown prince made her a target. There have been 3 assassination attempts this week alone, Marcus reported during one of the council meetings Natalie was now required to attend. Marcus was Vladric's security chief, a vampire who looked like a scarred warrior from some ancient battlefield. 2 were aimed at the prince directly. The third was targeting Miss Foster. Natalie shifted uncomfortably in her seat at the council table. The meeting room was grand and intimidating, filled with vampires who had centuries of experience in politics and warfare. She felt completely out of her depth, a graduate student playing at being royalty. Were the assassins from the Crimson Court? Vladric asked, his voice cold. 2 were. The third was independent, likely hired by someone who wanted to curry favor with the Crimson Court by eliminating your human consort. And their fate dead or captured as per your orders, my lord. Good. Vladric's hand found Natalie's under the table, squeezing gently. Increase patrols around the manor. I want guards on Miss Foster at all times when she is outside these walls, and activate the blood wards around the perimeter. Anyone not keyed to them who tries to cross will find themselves very sorry. Vladric, I can't live in a cage, Natalie protested. I need to be able to go to the city to attend my classes. Your classes can wait. Your safety cannot. My classes are important to me. My degree, my future, those things still matter. He turned to look at her, and she saw the fear beneath his commanding exterior. Your life matters more. If something happens to you because I failed to protect you adequately, he broke off, his jaw clenching. I cannot allow it. Seraphine, Vladric's diplomatic advisor and one of the few female vampires in his inner circle, leaned forward. Perhaps a compromise? Miss Foster continues her education but with an escort, a visible show of protection that will discourage most opportunistic attacks. Vladric considered that, clearly unhappy but willing to listen. Who would you suggest? I will escort her myself, Seraphine said. I am more than capable of handling any threats, and my presence will send a message that the Crown Prince's consort is not an easy target. Natalie looked at the vampire woman with gratitude. Seraphine was beautiful and terrifying. With white hair she wore in an intricate braid and eyes that gleamed like rubies. She was also, Natalie had learned, over 400 years old and one of the deadliest fighters in the Nightborn court. I would appreciate that, Natalie said. Thank you, Seraphine. The vampire inclined her head gracefully. It would be my honor, my lady. Vladric still looked unhappy, but he nodded. Very well, but at the first sign of trouble you bring her straight back here. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Of course, my lord. The meeting continued. Moving on to other matters of court business. Natalie listened, trying to understand the complex politics, but it was like learning a new language. Vampire society operated on rules and customs that went back centuries, and she was expected to navigate them without making catastrophic mistakes. After the meeting, Vladric walked her back to her quarters, which were no longer the guest room she had started in, but a suite of chambers adjacent to his own. He had moved her there after the second assassination attempt, claiming he would sleep better knowing she was close. You did well in there, he said as they reached her door. I know these meetings are tedious, but the court needs to see that you are taking your role seriously. What is my role exactly? I'm not vampire. I can't do most of the things your court expects from someone in my position. Your role is to be yourself, to remind all of us why protecting humanity matters. To show my people that humans and vampires can coexist, can even love each other without one subjugating the other. He cupped her face in his cool hands. You are the living proof that my policies can work. That is more important than any political maneuvering. Natalie leaned into his touch. Over the past weeks they had grown closer, but Vladric had been frustratingly careful about physical intimacy. He touched her, constantly holding her hand, brushing her hair back from her face, pulling her close when he sensed she was afraid, but he had never kissed her, never pushed for more despite the tension that crackled between them. Vladric, she said softly, can I ask you something? Always. Why haven't you kissed me yet? His eyes widened fractionally. You are human, mortal, fragile. I did not wish to pressure you into something you might not want. I want it, she said firmly. I have wanted it for weeks. I keep waiting for you to make a move, but you're being so careful, so controlled, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe you don't actually want me that way. Do not want you? His laugh was strained. Natalie, I want you so much it is a physical ache. Every moment we spend together, every time you smile at me or touch my hand or look at me with those beautiful eyes, I have to fight the urge to pull you close and never let go. But you are not some vampire courtier who understands the risks of being with my kind. You are a human woman who deserves courtship and romance and patience. I will not rush you. You're not rushing me. I'm trying to rush you. She rose on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. Kiss me. Vladric, please. For a moment he hesitated. Then, with a sound that was almost a growl, he closed the distance between them. His lips met hers, cool and careful, a whisper of contact that sent electricity racing through her veins. Natalie made a sound of frustration and pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt. Vladric's control seemed to snap. His arms came around her, pulling her flush against his body, and the kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate. He kissed like he did everything else with intensity and focus that made her feel like the only thing in his world. His mouth moved over hers with skill born of centuries, coaxing responses from her that she hadn't known she was capable of. When his tongue traced the seam of her lips, she opened for him without hesitation, and the taste of him crisp and clean like winter air made her dizzy. They broke apart only when Natalie needed to breathe, both of them panting, Vladric's eyes glowing amber in the dim light. "I have wanted to do that since the moment you touched my hand," he confessed, his voice rough. "You have no idea how difficult it has been to restrain myself." "Then don't restrain yourself," Natalie said breathlessly. "I'm not fragile, I'm not going to break, and I want this, want you, more than I've ever wanted anything, Natalie." He rested his forehead against hers. "There are things you should know. Things about being with a vampire that are not simple." "Like what?" "Like the fact that I could accidentally hurt you. My strength is considerable, and in moments of passion, control can slip. Like the fact that intimacy with a vampire can create a blood exchange that might begin to change you. Like the fact that once we truly bond, you will be a target for every enemy I have ever made, and there are many." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I know the risks. You've been very clear about them, and I'm telling you I don't care. I want to be with you, Vladric, all of you. I'm not asking for safe or simple, I'm asking for you." Something blazed in his expression, fierce and possessive. "You humble me," he whispered. "A mortal woman, braver than vampires who have walked this earth for centuries. Very well, if you are certain, if this is truly what you want, then I will give you everything I am. But we do this properly. You deserve a courtship worthy of a consort to the crown prince." "What does that mean?" His smile was full of promise. "It means I am going to romance you, Natalie Foster. I am going to give you poetry and flowers and moonlit walks through gardens. I am going to take you dancing in halls that mortals never see. I am going to show you the beauty of my world before I claim you completely. And when I finally make you mine in every way, it will be because you have chosen it with full knowledge of what it means." "That sounds like it's going to take a while." "Good things are worth waiting for," says the immortal vampire who has all the time in the world. He laughed and kissed her again, softer this time, a promise of things to come. "Go to sleep, my stubborn, beautiful human. Dream of me." "Always," she said, and it was true. These days, Vladric inhabited all her dreams and increasingly all her waking thoughts as well. She was falling in love with a vampire prince, and it should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The courtship Vladric promised was like something out of a period romance. He took her to a vampire ball held in an underground chamber beneath the city. A vast space filled with candlelight and music played on instruments that predated the Industrial Revolution. Natalie danced with a vampire prince while creatures who had lived for centuries watched with curious eyes, and she felt like a princess in a dark fairy tale. He took her to his private library and read her poetry in languages she didn't understand, then translated them into English. His voice turning the ancient words into music. He gave her gifts, jewelry that had belonged to vampire queens. First editions of books she had only ever seen in museums, a dress made of fabric so fine it seemed woven from shadow and starlight. And he told her stories. Stories of his long life, of the things he had seen and done, of the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. He told her about the woman in the portrait who had been his sister, married off to a vampire lord she despised and ultimately driven to walk into the sunrise to escape her life. He told her that was when he had decided to change things, to fight for a world where no one human or vampire had to choose death over an unwanted existence. In return, Natalie told him about her own life, her childhood in a small town, her love of art and history, her dreams of working in museum conservation. She told him about her parents who had died in a car accident when she was 19, leaving her alone in the world. She told him about the loneliness that had haunted her, the feeling that she had never quite fit anywhere, never found the place or people where she belonged. "You belong here," Vladric told her one night as they sat together in his chambers, her tucked against his side as he ran cool fingers through her hair. "With me. I know it is a strange world, and I know you never asked for any of this, but you belong here, Natalie. You belong with me." And the terrifying thing was, she believed him. Despite everything, the assassination attempts, the vampire politics, the sheer insanity of the situation, she felt more at home in Vladric's dark manor than she had anywhere else in her life. But their happiness could not last forever. The Crimson Court was not idle. The attack came on a night when Vladric had been called away to a council meeting with representatives from another vampire court. Seraphine was escorting Natalie back from the university, where she had attended an evening class on Renaissance art. They were in the car, just pulling through the gates of the manor, when figures appeared out of the darkness, vampires. 8 of them, all armed with weapons that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Silver was one of the few substances that could truly harm a vampire, slow their healing, poison their blood. "Stay in the car," Seraphine ordered, her voice sharp with command. She was out the door before Natalie could respond, moving with the inhuman speed of her kind. The fight was brutal and swift. Seraphine was a whirlwind of violence, her movements precise and deadly. But there were 8 attackers, all of them trained warriors, and she was alone. Natalie watched in horror as a silver blade caught Seraphine across the ribs, black blood spraying. The vampire woman faltered, and that moment of weakness was all the attackers needed. They swarmed her. Seraphine went down under the weight of bodies, still fighting, but overwhelmed. And then they turned their attention to the car. Natalie's hands were shaking as she fumbled with her phone, trying to call Vladric. The car door was ripped open before she could complete the call. Hands grabbed her, dragging her out into the night. She screamed and fought, but human strength was nothing against vampire power. One of them, a vampire with cold blue eyes and a cruel smile, grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off her feet. "The Crown Prince's human pet," he said, his voice mocking. "The Crimson Court sends their regards. Your death will be a message he cannot ignore." Natalie couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. This was it. This was how she died. Then the vampire holding her jerked, his eyes going wide. He looked down, and Natalie followed his gaze to see a hand, Vladric's hand, protruding from his chest. Fingers wrapped around what looked like a still-beating heart. "No one?" Vladric said, his voice absolutely empty of emotion. "Trechel's what is mine." He ripped his hand back, pulling the vampire's heart with it. The creature fell, already disintegrating into ash. Vladric caught Natalie before she could hit the ground, setting her gently aside. Then he turned on the remaining attackers. It was not a fight. It was a slaughter. Vladric moved like death itself, faster than the eye could follow, stronger than anything natural. He tore through the assassins with his bare hands, painting the grounds of his manor with black blood and ash. The few who tried to run didn't make it more than a few steps before he caught them. When it was over, when the last attacker had been reduced to nothing, Vladric turned to Natalie. His clothes were destroyed, his hands covered in blood, his eyes glowing like coals. He looked absolutely terrifying, a monster from nightmares given form, and Natalie ran to him. She threw herself into his arms, and he caught her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking, felt the careful control he maintained every moment threatening to shatter. "I almost lost you," he said, his voice breaking. "If I had been even a moment later, if I had not felt your fear through our bond, but you weren't, you saved me. Again, this cannot continue. Every day you are with me, you are in danger. The Crimson Court will not stop. They will keep sending assassins until they succeed." He pulled back, his hands framing her face, and she saw anguish in his eyes. "Perhaps I have been selfish. Perhaps I should send you away, somewhere they cannot find you, somewhere you can be safe." "No." Natalie gripped his wrists, holding his hands in place. "No, I am not leaving you. We've been through this. You could have died tonight, but I didn't. Because you protected me, because we protect each other." She met his glowing eyes steadily. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But running away won't solve anything. The Crimson Court isn't going to forget about me just because I'm not physically at your side, and I'd rather face them together than live without you." "Natalie, I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I love you, Vladric. I know we haven't said it yet. I know it's fast and crazy and probably really stupid given the circumstances. But I love you, and I'm not going anywhere." He stared at her for a long moment, this ancient vampire prince who had seen centuries come and go. Then he kissed her, fierce and desperate, pouring everything he felt into the contact. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I have loved you since the moment you walked into my study and looked at me like I was just a man. I love you more than my crown, more than my court, more than my own life. And I swear to you on everything I am that I will find a way to keep you safe, no matter what it costs." "We'll figure it out together," Natalie said. "We're a team, remember? You and me against the vampire courts. Terrible odds. I like a challenge, despite everything," he laughed. Then he scooped her into his arms and carried her toward the manor, stepping over the ashes of his enemies. "Come. We need to tend to Seraphine and increase security. And then I need to call a council meeting. The Crimson Court has gone too far. It is time to respond." "What kind of response?" His smile was cold and dangerous. "The kind that reminds everyone why I am Crown Prince. The kind that makes it very clear what happens to those who threaten what I love." The War Council met in the deepest chamber of the manor, a room carved from living rock that predated the building above. Vladric sat at the head of an ancient stone table, Natalie at his right hand, and arrayed around them were the most powerful vampires of the Nightborn Court. "The attack tonight was an act of war," Vladric said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "The Crimson Court has declared itself our enemy. We must respond accordingly." "You speak of war between vampire courts, my lord," said one of the older council members, a vampire named Constantin who looked like he had stepped out of medieval times. "That has not happened in over 200 years. The bloodshed would be catastrophic. The bloodshed has already begun." They sent assassins into my home, they wounded Seraphine and attempted to murder my consort. What would you have me do, bow to their demands? Abandon my policies and my principles to appease them? I would have you consider the cost, my lord. A vampire civil war would expose our existence to the mortal world. Humanity would unite against us. We could face extinction, and if we do nothing, we face a different kind of extinction. We become stagnant, obsolete predators in a world that no longer has room for us. Vladric's hand found Natalie's under the table. I have chosen a path of coexistence, of building bridges between our kinds rather than walls. The Crimson Court sees this as weakness. I intend to prove them wrong. How? Seraphine asked. She was bandaged but healing, the silver wounds already beginning to close. What is your plan, my lord? Vladric smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We are going to do something vampires have not done in over 1,000 years. We are going to call a grand conclave. All the major courts, all the ancient bloodlines, gathered in one place to resolve this dispute. We will present our case for coexistence. We will show them that the future belongs to those who adapt, not those who cling to the past. And we will force the Crimson Court to either accept the changing world or be branded as traitors to our kind. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. A grand conclave was essentially a trial by politics, a gathering of every significant vampire faction to debate and decide matters of existential importance to their species. It was also incredibly dangerous. Putting that many powerful, ambitious vampires in one place was a recipe for disaster. That is a bold move, my lord, Marcus said. But if you can pull it off, if you can convince the other courts that your way is the future, the Crimson Court will have no choice but to back down or face unified opposition. Exactly, but to make it work I need proof. Evidence that vampire-human coexistence is not just possible but beneficial to both species. Vladric turned to Natalie. Which is where you come in, my love. Natalie's heart skipped. Me? What can I do? You are going to speak to the Grand Conclave. You are going to tell them, in your own words, what our bond means. What it is like to be loved by a vampire, what you have learned about our kind. You are going to be the living proof that humans and vampires can build something beautiful together. Vladric, I'm not a diplomat. I'm a grad student. I can't. You can. His hand squeezed hers gently. You are braver than you know, Natalie Foster. You walked into my study thinking I was a butler and proceeded to treat me with kindness and respect. You stayed even after learning what I truly am. You chose love over fear. That kind of courage is exactly what the Grand Conclave needs to see. The human consort speaking directly to the conclave is unprecedented, Constantine said. It could be seen as an insult to have a mortal address the assembled vampire courts. Or it could be seen as revolutionary, Seraphine countered. A demonstration of the Crown Prince's commitment to his principles. I think it is brilliant. The debate raged around the table, but Natalie barely heard it. She was focused on Vladric, on the faith she saw in his eyes. He believed in her. This ancient, powerful creature believed that she, ordinary Natalie Foster from a small town, nobody could help change the course of vampire history. It was terrifying. It was insane. It was also kind of exciting. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay, I'll do it. I'll speak to your Grand Conclave, but you have to promise me something. Anything. No matter what happens, we face it together. No more trying to send me away for my own good. We're partners in this. Vladric raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in that courtly gesture she had come to love. Partners, he agreed, in this and all things, I promise. The preparations for the Grand Conclave consumed the next month. Invitations went out to every major vampire court across the globe. Security arrangements had to be made. Gathering that many powerful vampires in one place required careful planning to prevent it from devolving into mass murder. And Vladric worked with Natalie daily, preparing her for the ordeal ahead. The key is to be honest, he told her as they practiced in his study. Do not try to sound like a vampire or use our formal speech patterns. Be yourself. Let them see your humanity, your vulnerability. That is your strength. Being vulnerable in front of a room full of ancient vampires sounds like a great way to get killed. You will be under my protection. Anyone who harms you will answer to me, and I have made my position on that matter very clear. His expression darkened. Several very prominent examples of what happens to those who threaten you are currently decorating pikes outside the manor. Natalie grimaced. She was still getting used to the more brutal aspects of vampire justice. Right. Comforting. I will not let anything happen to you. I swear it. Over the past weeks, Vladric had been true to his word. He had protected her, courted her, loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away, and she had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with him in return. The night before the Grand Conclave, they stood together on the balcony of his chambers, looking out over the moonlit grounds. Vladric's arms were wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Are you frightened? He asked quietly. Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. Is that weird? Not at all. You are about to make history. That is worth being excited about. He turned her in his arms so they were face to face. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that I am proud of you. Know that you have already changed my world in ways I never thought possible. I love you, she said, reaching up to cup his face. However this turns out, I want you to know that being with you has been the most amazing experience of my life. It does not end tomorrow, he said fiercely. We will succeed, we will convince the conclave, and then we will have eternity to build the life we want. Eternity? He hesitated, then nodded. I have been thinking. If you wish it, when you are ready, I could turn you, make you vampire. We could have forever together. Natalie's breath caught. She had known this was a possibility, but hearing him offer it so directly made it real. That's a big decision. It is. Which is why I am not pressuring you, but I wanted you to know it is an option. You could keep your mortality, live out a human lifespan while I remain unchanged. Or you could join me in the darkness and become something more. The choice is entirely yours. She thought about it. Immortality. Never aging, never dying, living alongside Vladric for centuries. It was tempting in ways she had never imagined. But it was also terrifying. Giving up her humanity, becoming a creature that needed blood to survive, leaving behind the sun and everything she had known. Can I think about it, she asked. After the conclave, when things are more settled. Of course. There is no rush. I will love you regardless of your choice. She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into the contact. And when he carried her to his bed, when they finally gave in to the desire that had been building between them for months, it was perfect. Slow and careful and full of love, Vladric's ancient hands learning every inch of her body, his cool lips trailing fire across her skin. He was incredibly careful, his vampire strength restrained to ensure he never hurt her, his focus entirely on her pleasure. When it was over, when they lay tangled together in his silk sheets, Natalie felt changed in a fundamental way. The blood bond between them had deepened, strengthened, until she could almost feel his presence in her mind, a cool and constant comfort. I can feel you, she whispered against his chest. In my head. Is that normal? For a bonded pair, yes, it will grow stronger with time. Eventually we will be able to share thoughts, emotions, even physical sensations. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Does it frighten you? No, it feels right, like we're two pieces finally fitting together. That is exactly what we are, he agreed. Sleep now, my love. Tomorrow we change the world. The Grand Conclave was held in a vast underground chamber that had been carved from bedrock sometime during the Roman Empire. Natalie stood at the entrance with Vladric, staring at the assembled vampire courts, and felt her courage waver. There were hundreds of them. Ancient vampires in clothing from every era of history, their eyes glowing in the torchlight, their presence filling the chamber with power that made her skin prickle. She recognized some of the factions from Vladric's descriptions: the Crimson Court in their red robes, the Shadow Assembly in their black cloaks, the Silver Circle with their elaborate jewelry. And at the center of it all, on a raised platform, sat 7 thrones for the 7 eldest vampires in existence, the ones who would judge this dispute. I cannot do this, Natalie whispered. Vladric, there are too many of them. They're going to eat me alive. They will not touch you. His hand was firm on her back, steady and reassuring. Remember, you are not here to convince them with logic or politics. You are here to show them something they have forgotten: that love can exist between our kinds. That we are not as different as we pretend to be. Just speak from your heart, and let them see the truth. Before she could respond, a voice rang out through the chamber, amplified by some acoustic trick of the architecture. Let the Grand Conclave commence. Crown Prince Vladric Drakenmoor, you have called this gathering. State your purpose. Vladric stepped forward, and Natalie followed a pace behind. The position he had taught her was appropriate for a consort. His voice carried through the chamber with effortless command. Honored elders, assembled courts, I come before you to address a fundamental question facing our kind. How do we survive in a changing world? The Crimson Court believes the answer lies in returning to the old ways, in reasserting our dominance over humanity through force and fear. I believe they are wrong. I believe our only path to survival is adaptation and coexistence. A murmur ran through the assembled vampires. The eldest vampire on the platform, a creature so old she looked like living marble, raised one hand for silence. Bold words, Crown Prince, but words are not evidence. What proof do you offer that such coexistence is even possible? I offer the proof of a blood bond. Vladric gestured to Natalie, and she stepped forward on shaking legs. This is Natalie Foster, my consort, a human woman who has seen our world and chosen to be part of it. She knows what we are capable of, and yet she stands here beside me. I ask that you hear her testimony. The marble-like elder studied Natalie with eyes that held millennia of existence. A human speaking to the Grand Conclave, unprecedented. But then, these are unprecedented times. Speak, human child. Tell us why you choose to stand with a vampire. Natalie's mouth was dry. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure every vampire in the chamber could hear it. But she thought about Vladric, about his faith in her, and she found her voice. I didn't choose this life because I'm brave or special, she began, her words echoing in the vast chamber. I walked into Vladric's manor thinking I was taking a job as a housekeeper. I thought he was the butler. Neither of us could have known that we would find this. She gestured between herself and Vladric. A connection that transcends species, that makes no logical sense but feels more real than anything else in my life. She took a breath, finding her rhythm. I've spent the last months learning about your world, about vampire history, politics, the long centuries of hiding from humanity. And I've learned that you're afraid, all of you. Afraid that if humans knew the truth, they would hunt you to extinction. Afraid that the world is changing too fast and leaving you behind. Afraid that adaptation means giving up what makes you who you are. And what would you say to those fears, human child? The elder asked. I would say that I understand them. Change is terrifying, but isolation is not the answer. Vladric has shown me that vampires and humans are not as different as we think. You feel love, fear, hope, grief, all the emotions that make us human. You create art, music, literature. You build communities and care for your own. The only real difference is that you live longer and drink blood. Everything else is just window dressing. A laugh rippled through parts of the chamber. But the elder was not laughing. She was listening, really listening. Under Vladric's protection, I have been safe, Natalie continued. Not because he controls me or compels me, but because he loves me, and I love him. That love has made me stronger, braver, better than I was. It has shown me that the divisions between our kinds are not insurmountable. We can build bridges if we choose to. The leader of the Crimson Court rose from his seat, his red robes billowing. Pretty words, he sneered. But love is not policy. This human may be content to be the crown prince's pet. But what of the thousands of other mortals? Are we to reveal ourselves to humanity and hope they react with love instead of fear? The risks are too great. The risks of doing nothing are greater, Vladric countered. Humanity grows stronger with each passing year. Their technology advances at a pace we cannot match. Already, they have weapons that could destroy us if they knew where to aim them. How long before they discover us by accident? How long before some careless vampire exposes our existence and humanity unites against us in fear? Then we take control before that happens, the Crimson Court leader argued. We infiltrate their governments, their militaries. We guide them from the shadows as we have always done. That is a recipe for disaster, Vladric said sharply. Humans are not stupid. They will discover the manipulation eventually, and when they do, their reaction will be far worse than if we had approached them honestly from the start. The debate raged back and forth, vampires from different courts weighing in with their opinions. Natalie stood beside Vladric, watching the political dance, understanding now why this conclave was necessary. The vampire world was deeply divided, and without consensus they would tear themselves apart. Finally, the marble-like elder raised her hand again. Enough. We have heard arguments from both sides. Now I would pose a question to the human. Those ancient eyes fixed on Natalie. You speak of love and bridges between our kinds, but love is easy when it costs you nothing. Would you still stand beside the crown prince if it meant giving up your humanity? If becoming vampire was the price of this coexistence you speak of? The chamber went silent. Every eye turned to Natalie, waiting for her answer. She felt Vladric tense beside her, felt his concern through their bond. This was the real test. Not her words, but her willingness to live by them. Natalie thought about her life before Vladric. The loneliness, the sense of never belonging, the feeling that she was always watching life from the outside. Then she thought about the past months, the love she had found, the purpose, the sense of finally being exactly where she was supposed to be. Yes, she said clearly. If Vladric asked it of me, I would become vampire. I would give up the sun, give up my mortality, give up everything that makes me human. Because what I would gain eternity with him, a place in this world he's trying to build, the chance to be part of something bigger than myself that would be worth any price. Vladric's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. Through their bond, she felt a wave of emotion so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. Love, gratitude, awe, and fierce protective pride all tangled together. The elder vampire's expression was unreadable. You understand what you offer? Vampirism is not reversible. You would be giving up not just your mortality but your very nature as a human being. I understand, and I choose it anyway. Not because Vladric has compelled me or manipulated me, but because I love him. Because I believe in what he's trying to accomplish. Because I think the future he envisions where vampires and humans can coexist peacefully is worth fighting for. Bold words from one so young. But there was something that might have been approval in the elder's tone. She turned to address the assembled courts. The Grand Conclave has heard testimony from both sides. Now we must deliberate. Crown Prince Drakenmore, you and your consort will wait while we discuss the evidence presented. Vladric bowed deeply, and Natalie did the same. They withdrew to an antechamber to wait while the conclave debated their fate. As soon as they were alone, Vladric pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You were magnificent, he said fiercely. Absolutely magnificent. You spoke with such conviction, such courage. I meant every word, she said against his chest. I do want to become vampire, Vladric. Not right away, but eventually. I want forever with you. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with emotion. Are you certain? Once it is done, there is no going back. I'm certain. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring everything he felt into the contact. They broke apart only when Marcus appeared in the doorway. My lord, they are calling you back. The conclave has reached a decision. They returned to the vast chamber hand in hand. The assembled vampires had arranged themselves in clear factions, now the Crimson Court and their allies on one side, Vladric's supporters on the other, with several neutral courts in between. The marble-like elder spoke, her voice carrying easily through the space. The Grand Conclave has deliberated. We have considered the arguments presented by both sides, and we have reached a decision. Vladric's hand tightened on Natalie's. Through their bond she felt his tension, his hope, his fear. Crown Prince Vladric Drakenmore, your vision of vampire-human coexistence is ambitious and fraught with risk. However, after careful consideration, we believe that the greater risk lies in maintaining the status quo. Humanity is advancing too rapidly for us to remain hidden indefinitely. The question is not whether our existence will be revealed, but when and how. The elder's gaze swept across the assembled courts. Therefore, the Grand Conclave decrees the following. Crown Prince Vladric's policies of coexistence and protection of humans are hereby endorsed. We recognize his blood bond with the human Natalie Foster and grant her the status of consort with all rights and protections that entails. And we mandate that all vampire courts begin developing strategies for eventual peaceful contact with humanity, guided by the principles the Crown Prince has outlined. Natalie felt her knees go weak with relief. They had won. Against all odds, they had actually won. But the elder was not finished. However, we also recognize the Crimson Court's concerns about security and the preservation of vampire culture. Therefore, we decree that any revelation of vampire existence to humanity must be carefully controlled and managed. The Crown Prince will lead a council to develop protocols for such contact, and the Crimson Court will have representation on that council to ensure their concerns are addressed. The Crimson Court leader looked like he had swallowed something sour, but he bowed stiffly. The Crimson Court accepts the decree of the Grand Conclave. Furthermore, the elder continued, in recognition of his successful navigation of this crisis and his demonstrated ability to lead in changing times, we formally declare Crown Prince Vladric Drakenmore to be King of the Nightborn Court, with all powers and responsibilities that title entails. The chamber erupted in noise, some cheering, some protesting, all shocked. Vladric stood frozen beside Natalie, clearly not having expected this outcome. You are no longer Crown Prince, the elder said, a hint of amusement in her ancient voice. You are King Vladric, first of your name, Lord of the Nightborn Court and architect of the new age. May you rule wisely and well. One by one the assembled vampires knelt, even the Crimson Court, however, reluctantly. It was a show of submission, of acceptance of the Conclave's decree. Vladric looked down at Natalie and she saw wonder in his eyes. We did it, he said softly. You did it. We did it together, she corrected. King Vladric. His smile was brilliant. I am going to need a queen eventually. Any suggestions? I might know someone, she said, her own smile growing. But she'll need to be turned first. It's probably bad form for the queen of the Nightborn Court to be mortal. Probably, he agreed, but we have time for that. We have all the time in the world. And they did. 3 months later, Natalie stood in Vladric's chambers, their chambers now, and watched the sun set for the last time as a human. She had finished the semester, arranged her affairs, said goodbye to her old life. Tomorrow night she would wake as something new, something immortal. A vampire and eventually Vladric's queen. She was not afraid. Vladric stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, and through their bond she could feel his love like a warm blanket over her soul. Last chance to change your mind, he murmured against her hair. Not a chance, she said firmly. I choose this, I choose you, I choose forever. Then let us begin, he said. He turned her in his arms, his eyes glowing amber in the dimming light. His hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness. I love you, Natalie Foster. In all my centuries of existence I have never loved anyone as I love you. I love you too, she whispered. My king, my Vladric. He bent his head, and she tilted hers to the side, offering her throat. She felt his fangs graze her skin, a sharp sting, and then euphoria, pure, perfect connection. She could feel everything he felt, the love, the devotion, the fierce protectiveness. She could feel his joy at her willing surrender, his awe at the gift she was giving him. And underneath it all, an eternity of loneliness finally ending. Her vision was going dark around the edges. Distantly, she knew she should be afraid, but she felt only peace. This was right. This was meant to be. Vladric's wrist pressed against her lips and she tasted his blood, cold and crisp and somehow perfect. Her body knew what to do even if her mind did not. She drank and felt the transformation begin. When she woke the next evening, she was no longer human. Her senses were sharper, stronger. She could hear Vladric's breath even though he was across the room. She could smell the night air and old stone and something else, something that called to her instincts as blood. And when she looked at Vladric, she saw him with new eyes. Saw the power that radiated from him, the ancient strength, the barely leashed danger. Saw him for what he truly was, a vampire king, a creature of the night, a predator wearing the shape of a man, and loved him more than ever. "How do you feel?" he asked, moving to kneel beside where she lay on their bed. "Alive," she said, marveling at the strength in her own voice. "More alive than I have ever felt. Is this what it's like for you, all the time? You will adjust. The intensity will fade somewhat as you grow accustomed to your new senses. But yes, this is our world now, yours and mine." She sat up, testing her new body. Everything felt different, stronger, faster, more coordinated. She felt like she could run for miles without tiring, like she could lift a car if she wanted to. "What happens now?" she asked. Vladric smiled, and it was full of promise. "Now we build the future. Together we will guide vampire-human relations into a new era. Together we will rule the Nightborn court and ensure that love, not fear, shapes our policies. And together we will have eternity to explore this bond between us." "That sounds perfect," Natalie said, and meant it. They faced resistance, of course. The Crimson Court did not give up their old ways easily, and there were other factions who resented the changes Vladric was implementing. There were attempts on both their lives, political maneuverings, betrayals, and alliances that shifted with the political winds. But they faced it together. Natalie proved to be a natural at vampire politics, her human perspective giving her insights that centuries-old vampires lacked. She became not just Vladric's consort, but his partner in truth, advising him on matters of state and representing the interests of humans in a world dominated by immortal predators. And when the time came when Vladric formally took the throne as king of the Nightborn court, she stood beside him, his queen, his consort, his blood-bonded mate for all eternity. The coronation was held in the same underground chamber where the Grand Conclave had met. Representatives from every vampire court attended, as did select humans who had been brought into the secret of vampire existence under carefully controlled conditions. It was a symbol of the new world they were building, vampire and human, side by side, working toward a common future. Vladric wore robes of midnight blue, his white hair unbound, a crown of silver and onyx on his brow. He looked every inch the immortal king, powerful and commanding and absolutely magnificent, and Natalie stood beside him in a gown of deep burgundy, her own crown simpler than Vladric's but no less precious, marking her as his queen. She was no longer the nervous graduate student who had walked into a Gothic manor thinking she was applying for a housekeeping job. She was Queen Natalie of the Nightborn court, and she wore the title with pride. "Who would have thought," she murmured to Vladric as they stood before the assembled crowd, "that the butler and the maid would end up ruling the vampire world?" Vladric's lips twitched with suppressed laughter. "We were never butler and maid, my love. We were always meant to be this." "Maybe," she allowed, "but it makes a better story my way." "Then we shall tell it your way," he agreed. He took her hand, raising it to his lips. "From this night forward we rule together. Partners in all things, my queen, my love, my eternity." "Forever," Natalie agreed. And as the assembled vampires and select humans bowed before their new king and queen, as the future they had fought so hard to build spread out before them full of possibility and promise, Natalie knew that she had made the right choice. She had come to Thornspire Manor looking for a job. Instead, she had found a family, a purpose, and a love that would last for all eternity. She had found home. And standing beside Vladric, her king, her vampire, her everything, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Two people who had started as strangers playing roles they were never meant for, and had somehow found a love that changed the world. It was the greatest story she could have imagined. And the best part was, it was only the beginning. Their eternity stretched out before them, full of endless nights and infinite possibilities. And Natalie, once human, now vampire, always and forever Vladric's queen, could not wait to live every single moment of it. Together they would build a world where love bridged the gap between species, where humans and vampires could coexist not as predator and prey but as partners, where a graduate student and a vampire king could find each other and change history. It was a beautiful dream. And with Vladric by her side, Natalie knew they would make it reality. The vampire king had been wrong about many things. He had thought she was the hired maid. He had thought he could keep his distance. He had thought he could protect her by pushing her away. But he had been right about the most important thing. They belonged together. And that made all the difference.